Good morning. I'm Joan Mcgrath. After last November's landslide election of Ronald Reagan, a friend told me, I'm not a member of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat. Well, my guest today might even agree with that statement, but he's in the fight to conquer the disarray that's become the Democratic Party. He is Roland Burris, since 1979 the Comptroller of the state of Illinois and the recently named Vice Chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Finding a way for the party to celebrate, next on Dimensions. Sometimes trying to bring order out of chaos creates its own havoc. Roland Burris, the first black in Illinois to be elected to a statewide executive office, is serving his third consecutive term as state comptroller. But when he was elected this past February to the vice chairmanship of the Democratic National Committee, he incurred bitter criticism. And the source of the outcry, though it seems improbable, was from vocal black leaders. Jesse Jackson accused Burris of subverting the Democratic Committee's Black Caucus. And Gary Mayor Richard Hatcher, whom Burris defeated for the job, compared him to Judas and to John Wilkes Booth. Today we're going to talk with Roland Burris about the efforts to reorganize the Democratic Party and the effects that political infighting might have had on that rebuilding. Mr. Burris, that must have been a very uncomfortable and unpleasant episode in your life. How did it happen?
Well, John, there was no problem. It wasn't uncomfortable. What you had were a few very fine individuals who perhaps were a little upset in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the battle, and they made some statements that were unfortunate. My program is always as it has been, that is to move the Democratic Party forward. There was a question about the leadership of the Democratic National Committee, the leadership particularly with reference to Mayor Hatcher's leadership. I had the support of several of the black members of the Democratic National Committee, and it was agreed that we should make a move to seek to change the leadership. That was done.
Have you and Mr. Hatcher decided to mend your wounds?
Well, no, that's not even the issue. I mean, the issue is where we're going in 1986 and 1988. I'm sure that the mayor will be aboard. The mayor has now come back on the Democratic National Committee, and there are no wounds to heal. So we're not going to labor over the fact that who won and who lost. That's all decided. The future, Joan, now is where do we go as a party, whether or not we will take over the United States Senate in 1986, which I say we're going to do, and also that we're going to elect a president in 1988.
Before we leave ancient history, and then I promise we will, it must have surprised you a little bit that Reverend Jesse Jackson was not in your camp on this issue. You were the chief executive operator of Operation Push in 1977. You endorsed Jesse Jackson during his presidential bid. Why was he not there for you?
Well, no, there was no problem with that. Secondly, because I was running for the United States Senate, I did not endorse any presidential candidate during that primary. I was a candidate in the primary myself. I know Reverend Jackson very well, and Reverend Jackson certainly had a relationship with Mayor Hatcher, who was his national campaign chairman. Reverend Jackson is not the issue. So what we're concerned about is what are we going to be doing in the future? And I have really no concerns about what was said by whom or about me or by whom.
You don't fear, as some of your critics have suggested, that this is going to cost you black votes in the future, that there is some black backlash because of what happened?
Well, you will find, Joan, that anyone who's in a leadership role will naturally alienate some people. Where I may lose some votes, I will probably also pick up some votes in some other quarters. But I have to still be able to appeal to a cross-section of people, what I call a true coalition of voters, in order to remain a statewide elected official of Illinois. I will be appealing naturally to the black constituency, of whom my ethnic heritage obviously represents, and I've always done that and I always will. I don't expect everyone to always agree with what I do or how I do it. But the bottom line is that I'm very sensitive to the issues and needs of our people, and always sensitive to the needs of the entire community.
There's a perception that you have aspirations beyond the office that you're in now. As a matter of fact, there's some rumors that if Neil Hartigan decides to run for governor, that you'd like to pursue his job as Illinois Attorney General. True or false?
Well, I'd like to answer that this way. I've been in statewide office for the last 6 years. In 1982, I was the top vote getter in the state from a comptroller spot, which is the 5th rank in office. I've served with what I would like to call as distinction as a member of the executive branch of government. And come 1986, I would have spent 2 terms in office. I think it is time to move up. I think it's time for a promotion. Anyone who is ambitious certainly ought to first do the job that he's done and do it well, and then the people of Illinois will speak. I think the people of Illinois are speaking, and they're saying that Roland Burris should move up to higher office. And should the Attorney General seek to move, that is certainly one of the offices that we will be considering moving to. But no decision has been made yet.
Isn't Secretary of State a better launching pad if you have higher political aspirations?
Well, not necessarily. It's not that one is better than the other one. It's more of a personal choice where you think that you could be of better service to the people of Illinois.
Oh, but the Secretary of State, his name's on everything, my driver's license included.
Well, but, my name goes out 50,000 times a day. My name is on all the checks as Comptroller. So you can't get a dime out of Springfield unless Roland Burris's name is on it. And that certainly carries a great deal of clout with it. But most young, and I consider myself young or middle-aged.
How old are you?
I'm 47. Elected officials or have some goals, and I certainly have some goals. And should the time be right, should the support be there, then we will more than likely be seeking to get promoted by the people of Illinois at their request, not at Roland Burris's ambition.
I was being a little flip, obviously, when I said that my friend is not a member of any organized political party. He's a Democrat. It is true, though, that the Democratic Party is in disarray. During the last election, the presidential nominee carried 1 state. Do you think perhaps the Democratic Party nationally is out of step with what the American people are really thinking? That we've returned to conservatism and the Democratic Party just hasn't caught up with the rest of the country?
Joan, I think it's much broader than that. Let me back you up. Just to the point of 1984. The Democrats still hold 34 of the 50 governorships. We still control 60 of the 100 state legislators. That's both houses, where they're House and Senate, and you got Nebraska that only has 1 house. We still control the United States House of Representatives in Washington. And we elected in 1984 a net gain of 2 seats in the United States Senate. So the Democratic Party is not disarray.
The perception is, however,
I think what has happened is it's just a matter of communicating a message. See, the Democratic Party has been very successful. If you look back to 1964, go back 20 years, what did they say about the Republican Party? The Republican Party was in disarray. It really wasn't. It was a time that where messages are conveyed and signals are given and concepts are developed. After the Goldwater-Johnson fiasco, they thought the Republican Party was dead. The Republican Party went back to build. It recouped, it came back, and it started with a behind-the-scene operation with some big money people in this country, backing a fellow named Ronald Reagan to become president. And Ronald Reagan just did not get to the White House by accident. All of a sudden he decided he was going to be president of the United States. It took Ronald Reagan almost 20 years to get to where he was in 1980. So the Democratic Party certainly has to project the proper image, be able to obtain the resources, to be able to use the technology of the communications medium a lot better than what was happening in 1984. Our message was not really communicated. If you look at what Ronald Reagan sold the people of America, he sold them what I call smoke and mirrors. He sold them of the American flag, traditional family values, traditional American values, and those are all Democratic programs. And I maintain, Joan, that the Democratic Party is the party that brought people out of poverty to middle class. When they got there as a result of Democratic programs, the scholarship programs, the GI Bill programs, the programs that provided for labor union increases, that raised labor to be able to make $25,000 a year, were Democratic programs. All we got to do is get those people back and have them voting Democratic.
At the risk of interrupting the rhetoric, what I said before is it was perception. It is the perception of many people
that's correct.
That the Democratic Party is in disarray. It is also the perception
I'm sorry,
of
not
many...
disarray. The perception that the Republican Party had a better message than the Democratic Party. How we proceeded, we probably took the negative angle as opposed to the Republican Party that was selling smoke and mirrors.
It is also the perception of many people that the Democratic Party, the entitlement programs, the social welfare programs, means that the Democratic Bible is spend money, spend money, spend money.
Well, see, those people can't have it both ways. When we cannot just say that those parties, or what they accuse the Democrats of, spend, 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 you have to look at the results of what that did. And as a Democrat, certainly not going to run and hide from the fact that we brought millions of people out of poverty with those programs, including the Head Start program, which stopped crime and prisons from being more overcrowded than they are today, which provided for a good standard of living for a lot of people, and which provided for the longevity of senior citizens. If we paid money for that, Joan, that was money that was very well spent. And as a Democrat, you can call me, or anybody else can call me, a spend, spend, spend person, but that is what government is to do.
What is your job as vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee? What do you hope to achieve? Is this perception problem an issue that you're going to deal with directly?
Well, see, the Democratic National Committee is made up with a chairman, 3 vice chairs, and a treasurer, and a finance director, and a secretary. Those are the officers. And what we want to do is to convey a message to the people of America that the party will be setting through the policy committee certain goals and programs that we hope to join in with the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats to agree on what the overall policy of the party will be. Then all the other organizations will fit into that policy. My bottom line is that we as Democrats must again to appeal to the educational benefits of the people of America to make sure that Americans are continually educated and better educated. Secondly, we must be concerned about the conditions of the living conditions of America, the crime and the poverty that continues to exist, which prey upon those people who are fortunate enough to still be working. And thirdly, we must appeal to the economic prosperity of the American people the way we did in the past. And once we put those programs into place, then all the other interests will fit into that umbrella, and thereby we will be able to communicate our message to the people of America.
What practical message does it carry that Paul Kirk, who is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, has asked you and your fellow vice chairman not to represent your own special interests? You are black, your fellow vice chairman are respectively female and Hispanic,
That's
also
correct.
female, but to work together so that it appears that the party isn't as divided by special interests as it used to be. What practical consequences
I think that there's a lot of emphasis being put on the division and the special interests in the party. That is the nature of the Democratic Party. We're not going to be able to get rid of that. The Democratic Party, because it appeals to a cross-section of America, is not a homogenous group like the Republican Party. And so you're not going to get rid of Hispanic group in the party. You're not going to get rid of the black group in the party or the labor group, because at the bottom of the economic ladder, that's where people conjugate. That's where the Democratic programs and policies are. They reach out for the people. So what we must do is to be able to formulate an overall policy, Joan, as vice chair or as chairman of the party, and the officers and the members of the Democratic National Committee, and let each one of those groups be able to say that, yes, there's something that I can identify with within this Democratic umbrella, within this Democratic platform. My responsibilities will be to work with the statewide elected officials. That's where my expertise is. I have been very fortunate to be elected twice in Illinois through the graces of the good graces of our voters here. I'm very grateful to them for that, and I might have some input to help people get elected statewide across the country. That's where we want to use our expertise. Polly Baca, who's a Hispanic lady from Colorado, is a state senator. She knows state legislators, and she knows that area. Lynn Cutler is a former county official and local office holder, so that's where her concentration will be. But I will not abandon the constituency group, the black mayors or the black legislators or the other black constituency groups that have politically elected officials.
As a money man and as a policy maker on the national level for the Democratic Party, how would you handle some of the severe problems that President Reagan is facing? And let's start with the deficit. I'm not even sure we all understand what a deficit is, but we're told it's mighty important and pretty debilitating. How would you conquer it?
Joan, I am so pleased to hear you make that statement. I mean, most of your colleagues won't even admit to that on the air. That is the biggest problem that the Democrats had in communicating to the public, because the public does not understand what a deficit is. They understand what inflation is and what interest rates are because they see them every day.
Sure, it's direct pocketbook considerations.
But this deficit is a cancer that is eating at the inside of us, that we have no knowledge of the extent of it or the continued damage that it will do. We see it translated into Illinois directly because our export prices on American goods are so high that we cannot export to the level that we've been in the past. Therefore, the Illinois citizens are not working at the level that they should. Caterpillar Tractor is really suffering because Komatsu in Japan can sell their goods much cheaper because of the strength of the dollar. The reason why the dollar is strong is because of the deficits that we're having, and the foreign investors have invested into the treasury bills and the treasury bonds and keeping the interest rates high on that score.
It's far too complex for us to explore it all in the time that we have.
That's the problem. Unless we solve it, what we must do is, number one, we must change the rules with our trading partners. It's no longer 1945. Japan and West Germany can no longer have a free ride on the goods and services that are imported into this country. We are limited on what we can export to them. Finally, the United States Senate has come up in arms in the House of Representatives. I said this in 1984 when I was running for the United States Senate, that we must have free trade, that is true, but the trade has to be fair. Now you see what's happening. Japan is now beginning to feel the heat. There are limitations on what we export out of this country. And our jobs are leaving, going to Taiwan, to South Korea, to India, to Japan, to West Germany, to Mexico.
And the bottom line, how do you counteract marketplace conditions?
Well, it's not marketplace conditions. It's governmental policies that allow this to happen. Why are you going to allow General Motors or Ford an investment tax credit if they locate a plant in Mexico? And who's going to buy the cars that are being made back there that's in Mexico that's been sent back here? Nobody's going to have a job to buy the cars. So if we're going to pay now for the cars, you say, well, labor's too high. Yeah, but you're going to have to pay it on unemployment compensation. You're going to pay it out in public aid or food stamps or somebody going to prison. So we might have to balance all of that off, and there's a solution.
One of Reagan's solutions for balancing it all off is to send back to the states a lot of the welfare programs. How do you react to that? What's the impact in the state of Illinois of Reaganomics?
I think that the president has really misguided and misdirected on all of his programs. He tried to sell a concept called New Federalism. You remember that? Well, all these programs are going to be sent back to the states. It was not very well thought out. Most of the states didn't run these programs in the first place. These are programs that were generated by the United States Congress as a result of the states failing to act. And it was the Congress that had to act to put these programs in place to help people. So I think the president, again, was off base there, but nobody really wanted to take that and make any mileage out of it, because the president can do no wrong. I mean, the voters said that in 1984 when they reelected him.
I trust you're not saying that on this show.
I'm not saying that on this show, and I tell you that the president is so far off base with misspeaks and wrong speaks and so many misstatements that it's really appalling that he's able to get away with that and be the most powerful man in the world.
So you don't think that the state of Illinois is going to deleteriously be affected by the return of those programs?
No, well, what we've been affected currently by his proposed budget. Should President Reagan's budget go into existence, Senator Alan Dixon has issued a report to say Illinois would lose an additional $1 billion in federal programs and federal dollars coming into Illinois. We're already number 50 in the country with our balance of payments with the federal government, the dollars that we get back from Washington. So that would just exacerbate the situation to the point of making it even worse.
At the risk of changing subjects, do the Democrats now have a contender for president in 1988? Is there someone there who's strong enough?
Oh,
Could
absolutely.
it be Lee Iacocca?
I certainly don't want to get a call in names. It's much too early. But don't ever count the Democrats out. We have an array of talent that's certainly sellable and marketable and have programs to sell to the people. So it's, as an office of the party, it's certainly too early for me to get into the name calling. Those names will be surfacing. But the movement is going on right now, as you know, and I guarantee you that the Democratic Party will be alive and well and viable, reaching the pulse of the American people in 1988, the same way we were from the 40s all the way up to the early 70s.
Does Roland Burris want to be a standard bearer in 1988?
Well, Roland Burris will be somewhere involved in 1988. No, I have nothing to do with it. I hope not to be running for office in 1988.
Do you have aspirations one day for the seat of the presidency of the United States?
Oh, absolutely not. No, no.
That's not
Joan.
what makes Roland Burris tick.
No, what makes Roland Burris tick is the love of people. As a young boy, I started out at 16 years old with 2 goals in mind, and I've been able to attain those goals. One was to be a lawyer, and the other was to be a statewide elected official of Illinois. And the people of Illinois have been very good to me, and the Lord has been very good to me. I've been able to attain those goals. I just want to serve people.
Let's talk about the state of Illinois. It's such a temptation to deal entirely with national politics with you, but you do represent the state as our comptroller, and you have been in that office since 1979. And prior to that, you served in Dan Walker's administration.
That's correct.
You were part of his cabinet. How do you compare Walker and Thompson?
Well, Governor Walker was, I think, a very, well, some people say you either love him or hate him. I happen to like Dan Walker. He's a tremendous individual. Very astute, very knowledgeable in government. I think that, of course, what got him into trouble was his position that he would not compromise his principles. And Mayor Daley at that time felt that he should defeat him. I think Governor Walker could have been president of the United States had he not lost that primary to my colleague. He had that material, was that material. Governor Thompson is more of a balloon tester. I mean, what I mean, you'll wet the finger and stick it up to the wind and see which way the wind's blowing, and that's the way Jim will try to go. Personality-wise, he's a decent fellow. I don't think he shows very much leadership. His Build Illinois program that he just came out with is nothing but a Democratic program that, number one, Governor Walker tried to sell. Number two, that Senator Stevenson put together in his 100-page document in 1982 with a campaign trail. And so all Thompson is doing is taking the Democratic program and trying to sell it as a Republican.
Well, maybe again it's a matter of communication. We were saying on the national level that it's the perception that the Republicans were and perhaps are unstoppable in terms of elective office. Is that true in the state of Illinois too?
No,
some people do believe that Thompson can't be defeated.
Oh, that's not true at all. I mean, Jim Thompson's going to have to answer for what happened in 1982 when he went around telling the people of Illinois we were okay financially. And when I was trying to tell them otherwise, but because he was the governor and I was just a little comptroller over here, they sought to discredit my comment. But Governor Thompson is very vulnerable. He lied to the people and misled the people in 1982, and the people will certainly remember that. And we had to go out for the first time in the history of Illinois under his administration and borrow $200 million. And that's never happened before in the history of Illinois. We used an act that was passed in 1898 to keep the state solvent under the administration of Jim Thompson. And then we had to turn around and raise the taxes. Well, he was going to try to overtax to get $2 billion, and I said, well, we do need some money, but all we need is from 900 to 900 million to, and I wouldn't complain if we got $1 billion, and the legislature passed a program at $963 million.
Is the state solvent today?
We have a very healthy balance in the checkbook today. It's running over $560 million. I don't want the people to get too happy because of those balances, because there's a reckoning day down the road. In the last 75 days, they will spend much more money than they take in, and we should end this June 30th with about $300 million in the checkbook. But then, and to get very technical, Joan, we will spend in the next 3 months about $380 million, which means we really ended $80 million in the red on June 30th. So,
but compared to the federal government, we seem to be in so much better position.
Oh yeah, we have to have a balanced budget. I mean, that's by our Constitution. We cannot technically spend more money than we take in. Plus, we can't print money either.
In your capacity as comptroller, do you have any control over that? Do you have any input
into
how solvent the state is and how the budget is balanced?
Well, yes, there's input in it. I have to give the official reports, and it is my responsibility to sound the warning as to just where we are financially. And when it's good, I make a statement, and when it's bad, I make a statement. It is not for me to reason why. I report to the citizens in my capacity. Now, I do not determine that policy as to what gets spent. That is generally done by the governor and by the legislature, but it is my responsibility to report it, and I report it under any condition. When we have $560 million in the checkbook, I report it. When we had $11 million in the checkbook and going broke, and I'm holding up bills because we didn't have any money to pay them, I report it.
How much does Chicago politics influence what you as an individual in that job as controller do? Is there any relationship?
Well, from the political side, I am a Democrat. I'm a member of the State Democratic Party and the Cook County Democratic Party, and we have to be sensitive politically to some of the developments that are going on locally, but it really doesn't interfere with my job at all as controller. No politics interfere with that. I have to call that the way I see it. I'm representing 11.5 million people.
As you move up the ladder politically in the state, you will be needing Cook County and the Democratic Party here, which obviously is in disarray. You're very close to Alderman Verdoliak. He has been a supporter of yours. Is that creating friction between you and the mayor?
Well, no, I don't know if you could necessarily say that I'm very close to Alderman Verdoliak. I communicate with the chairman of the party because of his capacity as chairman of the party. And I certainly communicate with the mayor of the city because of his position as mayor of the city of Chicago. And I respect the mayor, and I certainly communicate with him. My association goes back with Mayor Washington much longer than my association with the chairman of the party.
Can you win an election in the state of Illinois without carrying Cook County?
Oh, I don't think that you can. I mean, you mean a primary? Absolutely not. And I have served the members of Cook County in the Democratic Party. I did very well in a tough primary battle in 1984 for the United States Senate. I would have loved to have won that, but I was up against a very strong opponent in the name of the gentleman who went on to win, Paul Simon. But I venture to say that should I run again for any office, I think that the people of Cook County and the people of the city of Chicago will be with me in my candidacy because of my record and my dedication to serve the public as a public servant.
Very quickly, we were talking earlier before we went on the air about the World's Fair. Do you want to ballpark it? Do you think this will happen?
I don't know. It's something that certainly is very controversial. I think that John Kramer has done a tremendous job in trying to sell it. I would say that it's probably something that should happen.
Well, you're the man who handles the money in the state of Illinois, and you are doing obviously an admirable job. I wish you continued success and also success with your aspirations in terms of political office. We've been talking to State Comptroller Roland Burris, who's occupied that position since 1979 and who is now the brand new Vice Chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Thank you for being our guest. I'm Joan Mcgrath. Please join me again on Dimensions next Wednesday morning at 6:30. Until then, have a wonderful day. Goodbye.